Hey everyone, welcome back to Devrite Technologies. In this video, we are going to implement Entra ID authentication with Microsoft Graph API calls in ASP.NET Core Web App Razor Pages. So let's get started. This is the last project that we created in our last video where we implemented that Entra ID authentication in Razor Pages, but without making a call to Graph APIs. In this video, we are going to do that. So I'll create a new project in the same solution that we created in the last video. I'll choose the same template, ASP.NET Core Web App Razor Pages. And this time I'll name this as Web App Auth dot Razor Pages dot graph dot Razor Pages. Okay. And next. And I'll configure Microsoft Identity Platform and create. Okay. Once you have this pop-up shown up, then you can configure the Microsoft Identity Platform in your project. If suppose it is a new application and you don't see this pop-up, what you can do, you can go to the connected services and service dependencies and click on this plus icon. After you clicking on this plus icon, choose Microsoft Identity Platform. That's one way of getting this. Also, if you are working on an existing project, there also you can do the same steps. Go to connected services, then add a new service dependency, choose Microsoft Identity Platform. If you don't want to configure in this way, you can do it manually. Since we'll be providing you code, you can just take that code and put it into your existing project wherever necessary. Alright, so let's go next. I'll create a new app registration for this purpose. Web app auth dot graph dot razor pages dot app. Once you create a new app registration, you'll see this option. So how one can create this app registration? They should have application administrator permission on their Entra ID, or they should have global administrator permission. Then only they can create app registration on the portal through Visual Studio or directly on the portal. And here we'll choose now add Microsoft Graph permissions. For the basic use case, it will take up user.read permission. By default, it will be added to my API permissions. We'll see this. We'll see this once we configure this. Okay, go next. So as we discussed in our last video, since we did not configure Graph APIs in our last video, there it did not create the client secret. But in this case, since we are configuring Graph APIs, it is creating a client secret and it will be saved in the secrets.json file. Why client secret? Well, client secret are mostly required if you are trying to call application permissions Graph API calls. If you are using delegated permission, which in this video we are going to implement that using delegated permissions. So what does that mean? Delegated and application permissions. So there are two types of permission, delegated permission and application permission. Delegated, user logs into the application and they can view the resources which they have access to. Application permission, an application will be logging to the Graph APIs and receive the resources irrespective of user logging in. Okay, in application permission you can receive a lot more data, like you can receive data from multiple users For example, you want to receive all the emails that is received from last 7 days. You can use application permission. If you want to receive emails from last 7 days for that particular user, then you can use delegated permission. This is one of the example. Okay, go next. And in this case, it is going to do these 4 steps. In our last video, there were 3 steps. There was no secret store coming up, but in this case, it is extra. Let me tell you what it is going to do. In code, it is going to update my code, add login logout page, and I think graph client also it will going to add, and it is going to update app settings.json. NuGet packages, it will install all the necessary package required for the authentication as well as graph API calls. Secret store, it is going to create secrets.json file in my project. It's similar to app settings, but secrets won't be committed to the Git repositories. So it stays on your machine. It is not part of your Git repositories. And update app registration. It will update your app registration by adding redirect URL. That's one. And also it will update your app registration by adding API permissions. So these 2 things it will go do. Okay, finish. So here you can see all the progress. It is installing the NuGet packages that are required for authentication. And here you can see the redirect URLs that will be added. Alright, it is completed and it is connected to my tenant. Let me now make this as a starter project. And let's see. Let's explore what all changes have been made to this project. Okay. First thing, we'll see the app settings.json. This is a similar Azure AD object where we have instance, domain, tenant ID, client ID, and callback path. So when user logs in, after login, this is the path it will redirect to. Let me show you that on the Entra ID portal. This is the app registration that this particular project has created for me. I'll go to authentication and here you can see the redirect URLs. So after user logs in, this is the URL where user will be redirected to. So we have both for HTTP and HTTPS. In client secret, it has created a new client secret because it is required for application permissions, not delegated. Well, in our case, it's not required since we'll be using delegated, but let's suppose we use application permissions, so it has created it. API permissions, okay, did not add it here. I thought it was adding the API permission because here you can see user.read is the scope of my Microsoft Graph. That's the object that it has added for Microsoft Graph and with the scope of user.read. I think it won't work unless I add it myself. So let's add the API permission, Microsoft Graph, delegated. Here you can see application needs to access the API as a signed in user and without a signed in user. For application permission, it doesn't require user to be logged in. Okay, so I'll just add that user.read permission. Sign in and read user profile. Along with this user.read, I'll also add SharePoint permissions to show you if at all you want to implement that SharePoint access. So SharePoint is part of sites. So I'll just say sites.read.auth and yeah, let's retrieve the site names for now because it doesn't require admin consent. Okay. So now, few things here to note. Let me increase the screen size. So few things to note here. The permission that you add, and here it says admin consent required to know no. What does that mean? When user is logging for the first time through the application, it will present you with a pop-up. The application will present you with a pop-up saying that user consent is required to access these resources. It will be mentioned with this description. Read items in all site collection, sign in and read user profile. These descriptions will be present in that consent pop-up. Then user can consent themselves for the first time when they are logging in. Now, let's suppose admin does that job over here. Grant admin consent, format tenant. What does that mean? Then, when user is logging for the first time, he will not see that pop-up message because admin has already given consent for the whole organization. Yeah, that's one thing. If at all admin do not give consent over here, they can also consent it while logging to the application themselves. Admin can log into the application for the first time and they will see the consent window and they will see that checkbox as well. Grant admin consent for whole organization. So that's another way of doing it. So I'll not make grant admin consent. The reason being I want to show that pop-up to you. Alright. So let's suppose few of the permission might require admin consent. Let me show you that, which requires elevated management. For example, if I just go to sites and here you can see sites full control. This is the elevated permission which require full control and admin has to give its consent for this permission. For basic permission which normal user can perform across their Microsoft 365 ecosystem, for that no admin consent is required. For example, if I open email, right? I think it's part of mail. Yeah, this one. So here you can see mail.read, read user email. So only user's email can be read by the logged in user. And these are all for the, I think, yeah, read, write, they can modify their email. I think nothing else. Yeah, I think this is all. For application permission, for most of the permission, admin consent is required. Let me show you a few things here. Sites. Here you can see admin consent is required because application permission has like of elevated access because it can access resources which multiple users have access to. It doesn't require user to be logged in. Application permission can see a lot of data. So admin consent is required over there. Alright, so let's now move back to our Visual Studio. Alright, so this is fine. Yeah, let me show you a few things over here. Yeah, I have also discussed in our last video. Let me also discuss it over here. This tenant ID, if you provide the tenant ID here, that means only this particular tenant can access and log in to this application. If you make it common, then any user who has organization email or even personal Microsoft account, which are the personal Microsoft account? Outlook.com, Hotmail.com, and I think Live.com. They can log in to this application. If you make it organizations, then only organizational users can log into this application and not with Microsoft personal accounts. For example, this Hotmail, Outlook.com, and Live.com. They cannot access it. If you mention it just your tenant ID, then only these tenant users can log into your application. So how it is going to generate this URL? It is going to append it over here during the login process. If it is common or if it is your tenant ID, so it is going to append it. We'll see when we log in for the first time. Okay, client ID is the unique ID given to your app registration. It is present here. This is the one. Okay, one thing I forgot to mention, by default, when you're creating an app registration in from the Visual Studio, it is going to create a multi-tenant application. You can see here accounts in any organizational directory, multi-tenant and personal Microsoft accounts. By default, it is going to create. If at all you don't want this behavior, you can create it manually as well by selecting as single tenant. Well, our application is behaving as a single tenant, but it is a multi-tenant application. Okay, so that's part of our configuration. Now let's move on to program.cs file. Here, it has given the initial scopes of Microsoft Graph or any downstream APIs. Why it is giving downstream APIs? Because there were two options when we created the project. Give Graph API permission and give the another API permission. So those are called downstream APIs. In this case, it is going to only pick up the Microsoft Graph scopes, not downstream scopes. Next, this is similar how we discussed in our last video, like adding the authentication and by giving the configuration from Azure AD object. This is going to take the whole object, and also it is going to add the Microsoft Graph, and Microsoft Graph object is here, this one. Okay, and authorization, this again we discussed. So what this will do, by default all the pages in your application are authorized. What does that mean? So when you log in for the first time by visiting the URL, you have to have login to the application. Let's suppose you remove this, or let me comment this out and just write builder dot services dot add authorization. I'll do it without adding any options. Here options were there, but here I'll not pass options. So what does this mean? Add authorization. So only pages which have the tag authorized will let user log into the application. For example, if I go to index.chhtml and here if I add like authorized tag, authorize. So what does this mean? When user will log in for the first time on the home page, authorized tag it will see and it will prompt the user to log in. Okay, so I'll just make it as default, comment this out and uncomment this. I'm making the whole application authorized for all the pages. Alright, now let's see what all things it has added. Let's go to the layout. It has added a new component, login partial, and where it is present over here. It just does one thing. It checks if user is authenticated, then it is going to show the user's email address as well as that sign out button. If user is not authenticated, then it will show up sign in button. Okay, in our case, since all the pages are authorized, we will not see this option at all. The reason being, whenever you're visiting the website, it is always going to ask you to sign in. Well, it will automatically sign in if you're already signed into your any of the Microsoft applications. Okay, now let's see what else is here. Here it is adding the services from Microsoft Graph Client. So it is injecting Microsoft Graph client, Graph service client, and it is going to receive yeah, the user details. That's all. Let's run this and see this in action. Okay, so this is the consent pop-up I was mentioning. Here you can see allows the application to see and update the data you give it access. That's a default permission, and also sign in and read your profile. Okay, I'm not sure why it's not giving me that SharePoint permission, but let's see if it has access. And since I am the admin, I can consent on behalf of my organization. I'll not do that as of now. Okay, there it is. Graph API result is retrieving my display name over here on the home page. How it is doing? That's a backend piece, and it is uh, storing the result in this object, view data, graph API result. And let me show you the front end piece. Here it is, view data, graph API result. Perfect. Now, let me create a new page that we created in last video as well. Razor page. I'll name this as user profile. In our last video, what we did, we got the user details from the claims when user authenticated, such as their name, email address, and tenant ID. This we got it from the claims. If you want to learn, just go and watch our last video. But in this case, we are going to use Graph API to do that. Alright, so I'll go to the user profile and let's use the similar tags that are present here. Okay, I got it. Why did not show up the permission that I was expecting? The reason being, we added the permission in the Entra ID app registration, but we did not mention it over here. We have to have mentioned these permission here. So let's do that. I'll go to the API permissions and sites read.all. Let me mention that. Sites read.all. Now here you can see it's again asking me the permissions because I have added a new permission in my application. The new permission that you add will be required the user to give consent. Okay, so now you can see read items in all site collections. This is my SharePoint permission that I've given. So I'll just give accept. Perfect. Now let's write some code. First of all, let me give a page for my new user profile page and just give a h1 tag, and also let me give the same tags Microsoft Graph permissions. Okay, and here let's add logger. Okay, and also graph service client, and let's initialize them in the constructor. I'm doing exactly the same thing, whatever is over here. I'll just copy paste this. Since these calls are asynchronous in manner, so that's why I'm doing it. So I'll make the same call For getting the user profile, before making that same call, let me update the layout by adding my new page in the headers. Okay, it's reloading, and there we have the new page, user profile, and there we have the h1 tag. Perfect. Now let's go here and let's view this data. So hello, let's use the model, not model, view data. What's the property? Graph API result. Let's not use that property. User display name, because I'm going to create multiple properties. Okay, so I'm displaying the user display name. Before going ahead, let's check this out. So I'll go to the user profile page, and there we have the display name. Perfect. Now let's add few other properties. User email. Let's see what else we have. Maybe profile picture. Do we have that? Let's see. I think we have it. Let's try to add. And this one should be image tag. There we have image tag, and it will be profile picture. Okay, let's see this in action if it is correct. Okay, I think I don't have the profile picture in my profile. Let's see in console. Reload the page. Yeah, I do not have that picture in my account. That's fine. Well, you can extract the profile picture as well. Now, okay, few things to note. View back, I guess. Nope. How I can add the title? Yeah, this one. View data title homepage. User profile. Why I'm doing that? Because here you can see on the title of the page, it's dash, it is coming. So I'll just reload this, and here you can see now it's coming as user profile dash. Okay, now let's explore the SharePoint permissions. I'll go to Microsoft Graph, and here I'll select maybe version 1, yes. And inside that I'll go to sites, site, and list sites. Hmm, okay, let's try it from beginning. Access the root SharePoint site within a tenant. Okay, list site. No, okay, I think this should be good one. Or list root sites. Let's try this one. And it requires permission. Okay, it doesn't require delegated permission. It requires discover the home site for each geography. Sites read all. Okay. Oh yeah, this is the one I was looking for. Slash sites. And let's explore the C# code of that. And graph client dot sites get async. This is the one. Okay, I think it's getting root, but that's fine. Let's create a list item. Private, no, not private. Property, list, string, and sites. Is it not? Okay, it's just getting root sites. I don't want only the root sites. Now it's collection pages. Perfect. And site dot name. Let's only display the name first. Perfect. Now going to user profile. P tag. SharePoint site names. Perfect. Model.sites and @sites. Perfect. Let's check this out. Okay, it's not getting me anything. Let's reload the page. I'll go here and I'll put a breakpoint. Okay, let's see. Okay, I'm getting it as null. Okay, I'm getting this as null. That's fine. What I'll do, I'll cross check this in Graph Explorer. There it is. And here I'm going to log in to the Graph Explorer and cross check what permissions are required. I'll open the sites again. SharePoint sites. And let's try to get root site if it is coming. Yes, I am getting root site. And what permissions are required? Sites read all and read write all. Okay, I have the permission. Let's try to get root site first, and then we'll take it from there. So what is the property it is in? It is in display name and web URL. Let's mention the web URL. There it is. Okay, let's first get the property. What's the name? Name. Okay, name it is getting blank. So instead I'll just mention the display name. And also I'll mention root site URL. Perfect. Let's mention it here. Perfect. Let's try again. There we have the root site display name, communication site, and root site URL. Perfect. This is getting fine. Now let's get something. It doesn't mentions the site addresses. That's strange. What does this mean? Root drives, no. Host name, no. Search for SharePoint. Okay, let me remove this and try to run the query. Strange. For sites, it's getting blank. Or does it not work with the delegated permissions? Because here in the Graph Explorer as well, it's not giving me the response. Here it's showing me blank. Okay, let it be. So the first thing we are clear that it's getting us the root site. That's for sure. Now to show you more things, let's try to get maybe which is the best permission that I can use. I think let's try to get emails. Let's not use the filter and let's try to get mails. Okay, it is getting me list of mails. Okay, and I'm going to use the same permission. So Outlook mail, Microsoft Graph delegated. Let's choose Outlook. No, it's called mail only. Mail. And what's the permission required for that? It says mail.read basic allows the app to read email in the signed user mail except body, preview body, attachment. Okay, let's use the same. We'll only display the subject line. We don't need to view the subject body. Okay, read basic. Let's give that read basic. Okay, I'm just using the minimal permissions. Alright, so now let's add that mail.read basic in our app settings. Mail.read basic. Next, let's retrieve some mails. And how I can do that? Graph Explorer. Let's go to mail, message, list message, me messages. Let's try this. Okay, it's using the same thing. Me message. Perfect. And I don't want these me dot messages. Okay, and it's getting me mails. Perfect. Now let me use the same collection, mails. Perfect. I'm going to display subject line, and here it will be mails. And mail. Perfect. So now if I log in, it is going to ask me permissions, access denied. The reason being I need to restart the application so that it will ask me the new permission consent. There it is. It's asking me new permissions, that is read user basic mail. There it is. Perfect. So I have mentioned all the subjects of my emails that are received. I think top 10 it is going to get by default. 3, 6, 9, 10. Yeah. By default, it is going to retrieve top 10 emails because here it is mentioned somewhere. Yeah, there it is. Default page size is 10 messages. Okay, you can update that page size or you can keep it as 10 pages and you can implement that pager in your application. And when somebody clicks on the next page, then you retrieve the next 10. So how you can do, like you can use, I think, top 10 and skip value. Skip 10 means it is start with the 11th message. Okay, this all in this video, and thanks everyone, and see you in the next one. Thank you.